Welcome everyone to MailFuzz TV. I am Peter and today I'm going to be talking about the Pitt Season 2 Episode 2. It's 8 AM, so spoilers for the episode as always, and this is a Patreon sponsored review, so thank you very much to Alison for making the pick. So yeah, lots to talk about here, and as per usual there's a lot of little cases, none of which, or most of which, I'm probably not going to remember, and it's more the character interactions and their main cast and how they're kind of dealing with the various situations, barring a couple of notable ones. And there's a lot in here. There's that we got urine, we got blood, we got erections, we got all sorts of things happening in this episode. I think the first thing that honestly I want to say about this episode is just how funny it was. Like, I felt like it was making me laugh almost every scene. There was a lot of just situations where, you know, whether it was like characters noticing something. Like there's a scene where Robbie and I think it's like the lady in charge of the beds in the hospital, I can't remember her name, she's like, this is the first time I've seen her, but clearly they've got something going on. There's clearly kind of some sort of awkward, like, how do we speak to each other at work and not be inappropriate, but Mackay is like clearly noticing the weird vibe in the room and is just kind of staring at them, and it's very funny. And there's just lots of little moments like that, or little competitive moments between some of the characters, or for example, when King's still worried about her deposition that's coming up, and she's really, tense about it, and she's visibly, noticeably distracted by it. Robbie tries to comfort her and say, "Hey, I've been named in a lawsuit 7 times, and it's not a big deal, blah, blah, blah." And he hands it over to Dr. Al, and she just says, "Oh, I've never been named in a lawsuit." And then the look on King's face when she looks back at Robbie, as if that's just made her worry more. That's worse. Like, he's made the situation worse, not intentionally so, but by passing it over to her. And because Dr. Al's like this by the book person, yeah, she's very proud that she's never had a lawsuit named after her. But yeah, anyway, so there's a lot going on in this episode. There's a lot of things happening, and it was making me laugh a lot. Sometimes in sweet little innocent ways, sometimes in kind of like sort of biting, more satirical ways, but it was making me laugh pretty constantly, and there's no way I'm going to remember all the times I was laughing throughout. But I think that's the thing that was catching me off guard about it, is that it wasn't just one or two characters who were consistently being funny. It was like different groups of characters, different pairs of characters that were making me laugh in this episode. So I don't know if that's just partially because I know the characters so well at this point that it's very easy to sort of put them in situations that are going to like evoke laughter, because I understand kind of the joke at their expense, or understand how it clashes with their personality, or whatever it is. But that Dr. King example, Mel being worried about the position, and that look of fear in her face when that was not reassuring, was intensely funny. So yeah, I mean, like, credit where credit's due for that stuff. So where do I start, really? I guess obviously there's a lot more Robbie and Dr. Al Hashimi. I'll just call it Dr. Al for short. But she and him clash a lot more. They're talking over each other a lot more, to the point where there's straight up conflicting advice being given in the room, and they don't know which, it's like, do we have the patient this one thing or both these things? It was like ketamine and something else. And Robbie just kind of overrules her and says, "Do the thing I said." And then he's kind of proven right to an extent throughout what happens, where, hey, that worked exactly as planned. We unstuck this broccoli from the guy's throat. And if we'd given him the other thing, we'd have to incubate him for another couple hours or something like that. So it's making its case. We naturally kind of side with him more because we know him better, right? I think there is an inherent bias in that we're in a TV show and we're coming back to these characters that we've spent a year with, and we've seen how they operate in this place, no pun intended, and this new character's coming in trying to throw a wrench into the works. It's very easy to side with the characters that we already know. So I always be aware of that bias. Having said that, Dr. Al does do a few things this episode, particularly the demonstration of her AI app, which is there to record basically the appointment with the patient, and takes all the notations down just by listening, so that she doesn't have to write a report up after. And she's really proud to show this off. Like, she asks like as many of the students to come over and like watch this as possible. She even wants Langdon to sort of stay in there, and he quickly ducks out. And we cut away, we come back, and she's like, hey, now watch this. And she has it come up on the screen, an entire report written out just by the AI who was listening to the conversation. And notably, the new students, right, we get a little bit more of both of them in this episode, I'll talk about them, but they seem to be a bit more impressed, like, oh, wow, this is that. Javadi does, to be fair, say, hey, this will save a lot of time. She sees the potential benefit of it. But then, quite quickly, I think it's Whittaker who notices, wait a minute, this says his medication is this and this, but it's actually this and this. And she's like, yes, AI is not perfect. There's going to be minor imperfections. We have to always proofread and go over it and change or correct anything that's incorrect. And of course, I'm already thinking, well, yeah, but is the proofreading and the changing of stuff, like, in some ways, that's, like, harder, because you're having to catch things that are wrong as opposed to just writing out what you know is right. Like, there's actually, in some ways, that might take more time depending on what it is, because you're having to spot things, and it might actually be possible to make more mistakes because you're not catching them. And this is just my commentary on the situation. That's nothing they say in the scene. But you can kind of feel this weird vibe in the room as she's saying, yeah, it's not perfect. You have to, always proofread and fix things that are wrong. But how long until, like, okay, the medication was wrong in this case, but how long until an allergy is incorrectly put down? And therefore, when this patient's back in the future, something goes wrong because the information was incorrect. That was immediately kind of like where my mind was going through all this. And it's kind of perfectly kind of summed up at the very end of the episode, actually, where she's trying to talk to Robbie about all this and sort of talk about how her passport system's great, how her Gen AI stuff is great. And, like, they get interrupted because there's a patient arriving. And very clearly, there's no time to talk about all this new techniques that you want to implement. We've got to actually deal with the patients. So it kind of sums up kind of at least his perspective visually here, which is like, no, we've got patients to see to. We're going to go deal with the patients. So, yeah, more confliction there, more button heads, and lots of little snipey things backwards and forwards. And it's funny because one of the subplots of this episode is that Javadi starts getting competitive with the one of the other students, right? Because Whittaker's a full-on doctor now. I don't think they mentioned that, or I caught that in the first episode, but they really hit that home here, where Javadi's like, hey, Whittaker's an actual doctor now. That's cool and whatever. But she starts getting competitive with the guy, the young guy. Oh god. Oh, his name. The girl's name's Joy. I caught that. I'll have to listen for his name next time. But he is, like, getting kind of competitive himself this episode by, like, jumping in and basically just reading out the textbook back at them. As like, hey, what could possibly be causing this? And he'll list like 5 things, and he's like clearly verbatim just saying the knowledge out loud. And he's kind of impressing people. He speaks a little bit of Farsi, which impresses Dr. Al. It feels like he's really trying to show off. And that's something that the Whittaker notices, because he even tries to correct Whittaker in front of Robbie at some point. And he's technically correct. Like, everything he adds on is correct information, but it's not like Whittaker forgot about it. Whittaker was just explaining that, because they're draining the alcoholic, and he's saying, oh, if this was clouded, there'd be an infection. And that's all he says. And then the young guy's like, oh, but he forgot to mention if there was blood in it, it would mean this. And it's like, well, sure. Like, I mean, it's correct, but it's not necessarily was relevant in the moment. Which is interesting that he's accusing Whittaker of forgetting to teach certain things, because Whittaker, we've already seen from episode 1, is teaching things that he learned from Robbie that are, outside like what you learn in med school. That's not the textbook stuff. That's like how you actually talk to human beings and how you actually conduct yourself around patients and or the workplace and stuff like that. But Javadi gets a little paranoid when Santos points out that this guy is probably gunning for the same position she is, this residency at this ER room next year. He probably wants it, and he's very impressive. So Javadi very quickly starts getting competitive, and we get to a point in like the operating room where they're both like jumping in front of each other, and they're clearly competing. There's basically like a verbal tennis match going on, and Samira is like standing there just kind of looking up like what the hell's happening, and like clearly like understands everything they're saying, but is just kind of caught off guard with it. Robbie's sort of looking around at them, and it's like they get through the scene, And it's not until the very end where he's like, hey, obviously here we assess like how much your knowledge is used and how good you are with the patients, blah, blah. But maybe more importantly than anything else, we assess teamwork and like how we work together. Kind of like, grilling them both for this weird competitive match they had in the middle of a situation when they were trying to like treat someone. So, but it's very competitive. But I think what's interesting about it is that it's not an accidental mini reflection of what Robbie and Dr. Al are kind of going through to some point so far in this season. And like how there's maybe a little bit of a reflection there between the younger characters and now the older characters who, and obviously they're coming from very different perspectives, they're coming from experience, these older characters, but fundamentally there is kind of like a similar kind of like sparring match that it's been more subtle. Like Robbie and Al are trying to keep it more professional whenever they're having these little disagreements, but they're absolutely slipping out. They're absolutely there. People in the room are noticing them, and it's kind of funny watching Robbie get all, on a high horse. And I don't mean that in a super stern way. I just mean like, he's doing what he's supposed to do by telling them both to cut this out. But maybe with the lack of the reflection that he is also kind of engaging in a slightly similar version of this with Dr. Al at several points throughout the episode. But yeah, a lot of this was humorous as well. Like it's played for fun for the most part, and I was enjoying that side of things. So we got that cooking. We also have our smelly man who needs his cast off. That's why he's there, the one that got washed last episode. It really just all comes down to one scene in this episode where they go to cut the cast off, and they build up so much that it smells bad, and that like they spend some time kind of explaining like how they're going to cut it off to the patient, and that the young nurse there, Emma's there, and a couple others are there, and basically I was kind of wincing because I was like, okay, they're going to show something bad. Like I was expecting like half of his arm to be like exposed or rotten or something, or just something disgusting. And it was something disgusting, but it wasn't quite that. It was actually maggots that are there when they split the cast open, and everyone's just kind of freaked out. That's poor girl Emma in this episode has to deal with the maggots on the arm, and I think goes away to vomit. Like I think Dana like just grabs like a little barf bag and gives it to her and is like, off you go. We know you have to do it, go do it, but no one's going to make a fuss. You got that, but then she also ends up being there to witness some of the I can't remember the medical term for it, but the everlasting erection that comes in later, which also inherently is a funny thing. It's never serious, it never becomes something that's going to cause him any serious damage. Inherently it's a funny medical condition, right? Just like the fork in the nose from the end of last season or something else. It's just this guy who maybe took a little bit too much enhancements for his anniversary, and he's had an erection for 18 hours. Langdon, is the one who greets him and all that, but ultimately it's others who take it away. So we actually get this just kind of absurd scene where the guy's knocked out, and it's like Santos and King who are kind of like holding his penis and like just basically just extracting blood from it with a big syringe. And just squirting all this blood into a pan, and it's just, there's something really absurd about like this garment where his penis is just sticking out, and you've got like 4 people standing around him, just talking about it. I don't know, it's just kind of a weird surreal thing. Like it's probably so thankful actually he doesn't have to be awake for this, because it would probably be extremely uncomfortable and mortifying. But and he's knocked out, he's not going to remember any of it. And we probably never even meet half the people who were in the room that doing this procedure. But it just, again, it's one of those more absurd moments. And Emma even kind of points this out. She's like, hey, do you guys do this every day? And Santos has a little joke like, oh, if we're lucky. So you've got that going on. It's a funny little subplot. Get you have some fun with that. And it kind of felt, I kind of liked how like Dana would keep leaving Emma in these situations and go, okay, you've got this, you help them out, you come get me if you need me, and she'll leave with a smile on her face. There's kind of an upbeat kind of energy, even though she knows just how much this all is to take in on her first day. So yeah, good fun, had a lot of entertainment from that plot. Speaking of Santos, maybe pivot back into the plotline with the girl, who there's not a ton of advancement in this episode, necessarily. There's more talking to the girl about, how she gets hurt sometimes, she falls off her horse, or she doesn't fall off her horse, but she does go horse riding. And it's all very kind of, progressing. The big key things to take away from this, really, are one, another little moment in Robbie and Dr. Al, where Robbie kind of reminds Santos not to jump to any conclusions, but, obviously look into everything and so on. And Dr. Al kind of pulls him up and says, wait, did you say that to her because she's prone to jumping to conclusions? Like, she sort of picked up on the negative thing that he might have implied there. And he kind of has to defend her a little bit. And it does make me wonder if she's going to go after people a little bit. And not in a malicious way, but just in that she's so by the book, she's going to start kind of really, like, kind of itemizing everyone on staff and, like, looking at their deficiencies or whatever. It just kind of felt like Robbie felt the need to step in and defend her. There's also like a funny little sub-running thing to this conversation as well, where Robbie says, what does your gut tell you? And then Dr. Al's like, gut? Like she's mocking this idea of instinct, like that's not a real thing. And he's like, yeah, gut, the thing that AI will never have is instinct. And and once again, when they go to talk to, right after this scene, they run into, I think it's Samira, who's talking about her patient, and she says, I've done this, this, and this. No, I think it's Cassie, it's Mackay did run into. And Mackay says, oh, I've done this test and this test, but my gut's telling me there's something wrong. And there's just a little look from Dr. Al, like, oh, does everyone in this hospital operate on their feelings, like what they feel inside them? And it's like, all right, get off your high horse. But it made me laugh, though. It made me laugh, like, seeing her reaction to someone else using that word gut. Clearly it's something that Robbie talks about a lot, is the instincts. And it's something we saw Abbott use as well last season, I think, quite extensively. Is this idea of, like, just having a good sense of what was going on. Obviously the medical knowledge and the results of tests are all very important, but no, it made some sense for me. So that stuff's fun as well. And then the other thing from the plot with the girl is that we actually meet another social worker. Kira's not here, and now they just say that she's gone for a week and this guy's filling in. But the funny thing about this TV show is because it's always just set in a single day, it's like, oh, that's all you need to do to explain why someone's not there. They're just gone for the week. Maybe she'll be back for season 3. Maybe she won't be. Who knows? But we meet the ginger counselor, which I didn't catch his name, but that was his standout trait. Is he was very ginger. So he is the ginger counselor, and even if I do learn his name, I don't know if I'm going to change from calling him that because it's just such a funny title. But there's a nice little moment with him and Santos, though, because we see him talk to a couple of different people throughout the episode, but this is obviously the main reason why he's down here. And there's a moment where he's talking to Santos, and Santos says, yeah, they've put out a call for the dad to show up. He's in Newcastle right now. I assume there's a Newcastle in Pennsylvania, and they don't mean Newcastle, England, which is what my mind went to immediately, because they're expecting him to show up later. But she's like, hey, if he doesn't show up, then that seems pretty effing guilty. And the social worker's like, whoa, that's not, like, that doesn't necessarily mean something. Like, I want to talk to the girl, I want to talk to the dad and try and get a sense. Like, because he's talked to the dad's girlfriend and he's not really gotten much from her that implies that she's involved in anything. Because there's a point where, she asks an opinion about the dad and he says, I'm a social worker, not a psychic, or I think that's what he says. And there's like this idea that she does jump to conclusions, she's jumping, and she may be right. That's the thing, like, she could be right in this case, but it doesn't necessarily mean that she's always right to jump to this conclusion. So there's that moment here where after she said that, she also says, well, and if he never shows up, I'll go out and find him myself. And she walks off, and the look on the social worker's face, which is like, she might need some therapy. Like that was like, she said something that legitimately took the social worker and gave him pause. Like, he actually had to react to that line of like, whoa, that was kind of an extreme thing you just said. We might have to address that in some way down the line. So I think that's an interesting little beat. And I like that they're kind of prodding at this sort of side of Santos a little bit. And it's really a delicate balance, because obviously, like, what she's trying to fight against here is obviously something that is worth fighting against. And she has a history which makes her more inclined to want to sort of seek out and help people who are victims of this kind of abuse. But at the same time, she does jump the gun, and she's so eager to just assume the worst every single time, at least from what we've seen in these 2 seasons so far, that it does feel a little bit like tragedy, or I mean, tragedy may be a strong word, but it feels like this at one point might blow up in her face in some way. And I've been saying that since like mid-season 1 at this point, but it really does feel like that. And it does feel like other characters are kind of noticing it a little bit. And it's maybe even that she's a bit more open to sharing her feelings because she's been here for a while now. She feels like she's a bit more, you know, not powerful, but like she's a bit more comfortable just saying what she thinks, perhaps, than she was when she first started. And it's not like she was holding back that much to begin with either, but certainly it feels like she's, you know, there's very consistent character storytelling, and I'm very, very curious, like, how this develops. You know, like, if the dad does show up, say, next episode or so, I do wonder, like, her attitude with him. Like, is she going to be immediately kind of, like, confrontational? Is that going to come off quite poorly? Especially if he maybe doesn't turn out to have been guilty of anything. If we even get that answer, it might be something where it's left somewhat ambiguous because we don't necessarily always get a solution to that in, like, the span of a few hours, which this show is set over. So it's hard to say, but, like, I think there's an interesting, delicate balance here of sympathizing why she cares and is so empathetic about this, but at the same time acknowledging why going through people like a nuclear bomb, effectively, when there should be more kind of like reconnaissance happening. That's a weird metaphor I'm going down, but like that's kind of like where I'm feeling with that plot right now. And there's a couple of shared looks between her and Langdon this episode, and I think what really got me about this Langdon Santos build up, and same with Langdon Robbie actually, is that he has a heart-to-heart in this episode with King, with Mel, and I like that scene a lot. It was a little bit different from the one in episode 1, but now that he's done it twice, it feels like a pattern, and it feels like something that he might actually try and do with multiple characters. It might be something where he even goes around a lot of the characters during the course of this shift and give little moments where he says, I failed you, I messed up, I'm making myself better, I'm sorry. And it's very sweet that Mel says, oh, you didn't fail me. And he's like, no, I did. Like, I did. Like, I don't believe it affected my work, but I failed you by having myself in that position. And, you know, I was there to oversee you. I should be setting an example and not a cautionary tale, I think was the line that he said at the end of the scene. But if he is going around doing this with everyone, I think it's very interesting that both of the times he's done this, the scenes have felt very positive, they felt very heartfelt, and the person he's been telling it to has been very receptive and forgiving of what he's saying, and in a lot of ways very encouraging and happy to have him back, right? That's the 2 examples we've had so far. One a patient, one of the doctors. This is clearly all building up eventually to when he finally has a version of this with Santos, and I am almost nervous about how that scene is going to go. Because part of me thinks that, like, the obvious thing here, right? I think in season 1, you expected confrontation. I think here in this season, after these 2 previous examples of him opening up and apologizing for what he's done, which feels like a part of his, like, growth and therapy or whatever, maybe he's been told or suggested that he should do this. Maybe it's something he's choosing to do of his own free will. But regardless, I kind of expect a scene where he apologizes to Santos, at least in part, like maybe not for everything, but like, this idea that he, as someone who was meant to be there as one of their seniors, as someone who was there to be a teacher, maybe he will want to apologize to her. Maybe, and I'm very fascinated as to how Santos takes that, because the awkward like stares and little moments when they happen to catch each other's glance are very potent, and it feels weird, and it feels just a little it feels like, things are bubbling, and I think that's going to be a big thing. But the weird thing is I don't think it's going to be the last one. I think the last one will be Robbie. Now, I could be wrong, but my feeling is that we're going to build up till he eventually has this type of moment with Santos. I don't necessarily think we'll get one with every character, but I think we'll get a few more at least to give this impression that he's doing it with most of the characters that he knows. And then after Santos, which I think is going to go surprisingly well, would be my guess, is that maybe she'll not be sure how to take this genuine sincerity and apology because she's such a sarcastic, cynical character, so there might be a little bit of friction there. But I do think it's all going to be building up to the idea of him wanting to say stuff to Robbie, and Robbie, ironically, being the only one who's not willing to hear it from him. That, at least to me, feels like the dramatic kind of like build up we're having right now. But obviously, they could surprise me. Maybe it won't go well with Santos. Maybe it'll go well. Maybe it won't even go well with someone else. Maybe there will be someone else who feels a bit weird about having him back. But so far, it's been a very kind of heartfelt apology to her. And I do mean that. Like, that sounds cynical to call it that. But no, I think that's what it is. But I think it feels like he's making a point of doing this and being honest. Because he even asks, like, Mel, like, hey, do you know why I was gone for 6 months or whatever? And she's like, oh, there was rumors, but I never really asked. And he just straight up says, oh, I was in rehab. I was in rehab because I was addicted to this, blah, blah, blah. He wanted to let her know. He wanted to be honest about it. He doesn't want to hide it. And I think that's the big thing that's coming out from this for me, is that Langdon seems to want to not let this be hearsay and sweep it under the rug. He's like, no, this happened. I'm owning it. I'm telling you about it. And, hopefully you feel comfortable with me continuing in my job. So, so far, I'm really liking those scenes. Although Robbie's still ducking him. Even when Langdon brings him a patient that's seriously ill, he just takes him away and says, no, we've got this. Out, back off to triage. Off you go. So, that was good stuff. And speaking of Mel, I'm loving how I'm almost going to add other plots because one character like dovetails into the other. The reason why he's got a chance to have the heart-to-heart with Mel, we talked about her feeling worried about her deposition and so on. But she goes back to the patient that she saw briefly last episode that was flirting with her, and he keeps trying to flirt with her, right? But out of nowhere, security comes bursting into this part of the hospital, and as soon as he sees them, he bolts, and he bolts like with such ferocity that he pushes Mel over, and the back of her head crashes onto the floor. So she actually gets an injury here, right? And she seems to be fine, but Langdon's the one who comes over. Because they call Langdon over because they need a doctor to look at her, and he like checks her out, and he's like, hey, doctor's orders, you need to have this test and this test, because it's just this, and you're not allowed to not say no. It's a work thing, you have to do it. That happened here. But he puts her in her room, and this is where he has the heart-to-heart, and he turns off the light and says, hey, take 10 minutes before you go back out there, doctor's orders. And it feels very comforting, it feels very kind of sweet. And like, no, he knows she needs this. And Robbie was even noticing earlier that she was distracted and needed maybe to talk to someone. And I like that scene with Robbie as well. I jumped to talking about the funny part of like the conflicting information and King's reaction to the conflicting information. But I do really like that when he came over and said like, hey, you're distracted, what's up? And she's like, oh, my deposition's today. I really like that he didn't get mad about it. He just said, oh, do you want to talk about it? Like he immediately got it. He got why she's feeling worried and why she's distracted. It's probably also worth mentioning that when the guy was flirting with her, he was saying, hey, what do you like to do? And she's like, oh, I do what my sister likes. Yeah, but what do you like to do? And she actually struggles. She eventually comes up with, I used to like the Renaissance Fair. But I do think the idea of her like taking care of herself, and this is a thread that was maybe teased last season, was this idea that she's so focused on her work and taking care of her sister that she doesn't really do anything for herself outside of work. And maybe that's a reckoning that has to come at some point for her, and that's something, we see that Samira was a bit of a workaholic, and that was something that she kind of started to address at the end of last season. So there's definitely some overlapping themes here, which makes sense that a lot of them go through some similar struggles, some similar ideas as their lives play out. But yeah, I thought that was an interesting thing, and I almost forgot about it because it almost felt redundant after it became about her getting hurt when he ran away. Because it felt like, oh, they're setting up kind of like a sort of guest star here who might pop back up at the end of the season to pick her up for a date or something. And no, it's not that at all. Like he's ran away, but I do think thematically him raising that question and her struggling to answer it is an important character bit, even if the actual flirtation that was happening, and not that I necessarily thought that she was into him. She never showed a single sign that she even recognized this was flirting, to be honest. But you thought maybe this would be building up to a subplot of some kind, and instead it's actually takes a bit of a pivot, and maybe she has to actually slow down a little bit. So we've got that. Whittaker struggles this episode to tell the wife of a patient who died last episode that he's dead. And he actually has to do it 3 times because she keeps forgetting and clearly needs help for herself. But that becomes a thing where they have to do this. Now, I mentioned the overzealous competitive nature of the male med student. Joy, the female med student, she is just straight up looking at her phone at one point when Whitaker's trying to like teach them stuff. She seems disinterested and thinks things are disgusting. I'll be honest, I'm not sure why she's here. I'm not sure why she went down this path unless maybe it's something her parents forced her into. But she seems like she's not all that excited about what's going on or wants to pay attention to it. So I don't know. We'll see where that goes. But that's the thing. I don't have, I guess, a ton to say about, like, I feel like there's some characters in here that were around a lot this episode, but I don't know if they necessarily had like some pivotal big plot moments on their own. Like Samira and Cassie. I don't think, like, they're constantly there. They're constantly a part of scenes, and they're constantly advancing the other plot lines because they're reacting to Robbie, or they're reacting to the bickering between the students or whatever. I don't know if either of them had particular advancements in their own plots this episode, which is okay. Like, you know, there's so many characters, not all of them can necessarily have big advancements every single time. But yeah. So other thing is, Princess and Perla are talking about Javadi, and like, hey, does she actually even look 21 because her birthday's like, you know, this week? And she's like, she does now. This place ages you. I thought that was a fun line. And then Princess is like, please, like, she's like, no, I still look good. What are you talking about? Again, that was just like a fun little conversation more than anything else. The humanizing element of like the people who work here is obviously a part of the show and has been since the start. So yeah, I mean, I think that's most of the stuff that I would wanted to bring up. Yeah, I mean, I think this episode flew by, I would say. I think that it was a little bit shorter. Episode 1 was over 50 minutes, whereas most of them tend to be in the 40 to 45 minute range. This was in that. But it was very brisk. I felt like I was laughing a lot. I guess the only thing, and this is not really a problem for me, it's just a problem for the reviews. If it's something you want from a review, is to talk about all the actual medical conditions they talk about, is that I only tend to remember those well if they really focus on them, if they become like a big thing where like a lot of the episodes about trying to save one person and they're really getting into the nitty gritty of like what the problem is and like the tension that might come from the procedure. But I don't think any of them in this episode were kind of in that vein. There were more, I mean, they were tapping into at least one vein in the penis, I suppose, but you know, that was a joke. That was a dumb joke. They you know, it was like they were there as the background dressing for what was going on with the characters and how they're dealing with their day and everything else. So yeah, so, you know, when I feel like it's more interesting or relevant, I'll absolutely talk about them. But I mean, for this episode, it was mostly just you know, little thing. There was like a shoulder kind of that was sticking out of the armpit kind of thing, or the bone was sticking out of the armpit, so there was some popping of that back in. But I don't have anything. I do like that there's like a procedure for getting rid of the maggots though. Like, it just straight up says go get they're going to freeze them off, and I'm like, oh damn, all right, well, that'll stop them from moving, I guess. But I'm like, oh, this is disgusting. Like, I feel like it feels like there should almost be a special department to come in and like with like hazmat suits and deal with patients who are this ripe, if you will. That's what it feels like to me. I guess if I have a critique at all, is maybe just that the ending of the episode isn't really that much of a cliffhanger. Like, it's, you know, it's Robbie and Al having their, like, you know, disagreement about like her new practices, and or more accurately, he's just kind of like skirting the issue and not really want to talk about it. And they get interrupted by a patient who just keeps yelling. He's yelling, you know, F this, F that, let me out of here. And he just looks at her like, hey, do you want to leave your talk till later? And she's like, yeah, I think that's a good idea. And that's just kind of where it ends. Which actually, I've not really talked about the baby. I mean, there's a few more scenes with the baby this episode, and they're getting like a urine sample and whatnot. But I guess the big thing though is the cliffhanger from last episode, which I you know, it's actually saying something that I almost forgot to even bring this up because it's such a small nothing thing this episode, relatively speaking. But the end of the last episode was her looking at the medical chart of the baby or the test results and being like, you know, caught in a trance. And I think one of my guesses was that she was just having like a personal PTSD kind of moment. I think I'm siding with that now, because nothing came of it this episode, where she just kind of snaps out of it and like they go about their business. I mean, Samira does say a couple times, hey, you know, you look pretty concerned earlier, and she doesn't really give her like a real proper answer. So it does seem like maybe she just has, you know, maybe like a traumatic incident with a baby or a child of her own, perhaps, or something like that, that's maybe been triggered here with this infant. But yeah, no, it's interesting. There's a really little human moment actually where Robbie picks up the baby and, you know, just coddles it a little bit. Just again, a little bit of humanity going a long way in the show. But yeah, so yeah, it's actually kind of wild that that was the big cliffhanger to episode 1, and I almost forgot to even mention the follow up to it because it was such a little nothing part of this episode. Now that's not to say that whatever her past is won't be a something that comes up again later. I'm sure it will. But having done season 1 already and having like the tease of like Robbie's past like sort of be sprinkled throughout, that ended up being a much smaller thing than I think I was expecting. I was expecting like I don't know if I was expecting a flashback episode like late in season 1 where it actually went through the story of what happened that day or whatever, but I guess I was expecting a little bit more than we actually got, which is not necessarily a complaint per se. I don't necessarily think we needed it, but just the teasing of it at all made me think there'd be more with it. But having done season 1 now, I'm kind of expecting this might be of a similar level of like, yeah, there'll be a few things that like, you know, allude to this backstory. Maybe she'll talk about it a little bit, but maybe not be like such a big thing in the end. But again, could be wrong. Who's to say? Who's to say what turns it's going to take as we go down the hours of the day with more episodes. But that is my thoughts on episode 2 of season 2 of The Pitt. By all means, give me your thoughts on the episode in the comments. Like, subscribe, all that stuff helps out a bunch if you do. And of course, you can support all the content over at patreon.com/MailFuzzTV or via YouTube membership. Thanks to everyone who already does. But that is me. So thank you once again for watching or listening. I always appreciate it. Keep watching TV. Have you got any vanilla?